Zionist Union Knesset member Eitan Broshi has now been suspended by his party leader Avi Gabbay following yet another accusation of sexual misconduct. This less than 2 weeks after Broshi was forced to apologize to his colleague, MK Ayelet Nachmias Verbin, for inappropriately touching her buttocks at a recent party. Now, the new allegations reportedly took place 15 years ago when Broshi allegedly made advances on a coworker in an elevator. The woman, who spoke to Channel 10 on condition of anonymity, said she was blocked in the elevator of a hotel where she and Broshi attended a seminar. She claims Broshi pushed her, grabbed her, and touched her in her genitals, all while asking what her problem was. She reportedly pushed her way out and reported the incident to her then supervisor, who corroborated her story to Channel 10. Now, Broshi has since denied the allegations against him and is refusing Gabbay's suggestion to resign, and he's even now threatening to sue Gabbay over his suspension. Here now with more is Gil Ronen, a columnist and chairman of the Family Movement. Gil, thank you so much for coming in and being with us today. So, my first question, what's your reaction to this? Should Broshi resign?
Look, it's in the end, it's a he said, she said situation. We don't really know what happened. Now, we're all very aware of human rights and women's rights, and nobody wants to condone sexual offenders in any sort of way. But there has to be some sort of a balance between our intention of prosecuting the sexual offenders and their basic human rights and the presumption of innocence. And the way things work here in Israel with the women's groups is that basically he can deny all he wants. He can hang on to his seat. What they'll do is they'll put out a sort of like an APB to all women who have ever had any sort of negative contact with Broshi. And then these women will start coming forward with anonymous accusations. And that's the big problem. I don't think the U.S. Is quite at this level.
It's anonymous to us, but there have been some names. I mean, I spoke about a former supervisor and then the plaintiff herself who have made these accusations. Should the suspension at least stand until long enough for the investigation to continue? Well,
is there actually a police investigation? This is something that happened, assuming that it's true, happened 15 years ago, and the statute of limitations is way past. Mm-hmm. So I don't think there will be a police investigation. What can happen is that they will announce some sort of police probe. But again, the basic feeling here is that men do not have the presumption of innocence standing by them here in this country. And once you have somebody, especially somebody who's like a high-profile person like Broshi, who has one accusation against him, they're going to start putting forward more and more accusations, and they're all probably going to be anonymous.
Well, so here's the thing, though, is that I know that at least here in this country, the vast majority, we're talking over two-thirds, well over two-thirds, nearly three-quarters, of the allegations of sexual misconduct, rape, etc., are all going nowhere because of lack of evidence. Not necessarily that it didn't happen, but because the evidence there is lacking in the investigation. Now, with that being said, the former allegations against Broshi come from, a former MK, a colleague of his who
well, he admitted that.
He not only admitted
apologized,
that, but it was, well,
and
but
she
it was,
accepted his apology.
Seen. But it was seen. It was personally viewed by Avi Gabbay and several other Knesset members, and it was he only apologized after Avi Gabbay told him to.
Right.
In fact, he ignored the MK who he had touched, until Avi Gabbay intervened. So again, isn't there a sort of sense of like this boys' club where, if it wasn't seen, he would have gotten away with it because the lack of evidence is there?
Well, the thing is, that's true for any crime. And, women also commit crimes. But there's a complete double standard.
But I think that the statistics worldwide will show that men are disproportionately more likely to rape or perform some sort of sexual assault.
Maybe, but as far as violence is concerned, for instance, it's very balanced. And there's a lot of other types of crimes out there also. The feeling is that men do not get a fair shake here in the sense that once the women's groups hone in on them, the guy's finished. Everybody says, he's finished, it's over. And, I think if we had the same standard in the U.S., probably Donald Trump would never have been elected because they tried something like that when he was about to be elected. That if he does leave the Knesset, then there's another Knesset member, another politician who's going to fill his seat. And then there's always the question of, is this other guy somehow involved in telling other women to come forward and say that Broshi touched me, etc.? A lot of these accusations turn out in the end to be bogus, and we have to accept this. We can't just declare open season on men and say that once a woman made the accusation, it 100% has to be true.
Well,
and she never went to the police, by the way.
But I will say that, and unfortunately we have to cut this off, but I will say that allegations should be taken seriously regardless of the time, kind of distance between them and the statute of limitations. And when we're talking about sexual assault, there are many reasons that a sexual assault might not come to the fore right away. In this case, again, the allegations come from a former coworker. So I think there are a lot of extenuating circumstances that we don't know, granted.
Exactly. But
it should be investigated, and it shouldn't be kind of brushed off as, oh, it's old and who cares.
If it can be investigated, let it be investigated, definitely.
All right, now for more on this divisive topic, I'd like to turn to attorney and co-chair of Layla Tov, Keren Greenblatt. Keren, thank you so much for coming in.
Thanks.
So I guess what are your initial responses to what we heard?
I'd rather not comment on all the conspiracies against women's groups, which are obviously not really based on reality. But I do think one thing that's important to emphasize is something you said. There are a lot of reasons why complaints of sexual assault or sexual harassment don't come to light for many, many years in some cases. One of the reasons is because we know what the public response is. We know how the public in Israel responds to victims of sexual assault, searching for reasons to call them liars, searching for ways to undermine their stories. And that's one of the reasons why a woman or a man would choose not to come out with their stories right when they happened, even though in this case we do know that the case was reported the next day or the same day to this woman's supervisor. So in this case, I mean, coming out and saying it's been 15 years, there's no legitimacy to the complaint is false. I think there's a lot of women who will come out with their stories once they hear the same person who harmed them also harmed another woman.
So that's a good point, which actually goes back to what Mr. Ronen said in terms of how, you know, sometimes they'll kind of put an APB of some sorts to bring in other people and kind of try and find validity to previous sexual assault claims.
I don't think that happens. There's no APB. There's no like centralized feminist
APB,
war room that
right.
looks for more stories. I think women who see their assaulter coming out with another assault against another woman will have an interest to come out with their own story to validate that
right.
woman's experience.
So now I know that I even just a moment ago said, you know, every sexual assault allegation should be taken seriously and investigated, but there is also something to be said about a statute of limitations. So what do you say to that, you know, 15-year gap?
What I say is that the criminal arena is only one way that us as a society have to examine whether a person should be in the public sphere or not. Broshi is an MK. He represents the public in our parliament. And I think there are other ways that we can examine whether it's valid that he's there in this position and receives his salary from the public when he represents somebody who thinks he's above the law in terms of how he relates to women. So the fact that there can be no criminal action taken on something that happened 15 years ago means nothing if as a society we decide that we are not condoning this type of culture, that we're trying to change the norms of how people are treated, of their dignity, of how they're treated at work, and in other spheres of their lives. So I think we really need to remember that determining what the truth is about something is not only something that the police or judges in a criminal courtroom can do. We can do that as a society as well.
Yes, and that kind of brings me to your organization, Layla Tov, and how, you know, how does this sort of thing affect the public sphere in the arena that you fight in?
So what Layla Tov does is work with bars and clubs in order to train the staff there to identify potential sexual harassment and assault within their bar or club and try to prevent that from happening or address any kind of complaint that comes up to them. What we also do is we have signs in all the places that join our voluntary code, and that they say to the clients, if you feel like somebody's bothering you, if you feel like somebody's hurting you, you can come to the staff, and the staff is trained to deal with it. So what we think this does is it expresses a message that this space can be safe for you, and it can be a space that the staff has their eye open and will give backing to whoever says that they've been harmed, and we'll try to deal with it with the right tool set for that type of arena, which is obviously very different from a workplace and very different from other spheres where there need to be different tools for interventions.
Keren Greenblatt, thank you so much for coming in today.